Is there anything else that fires up Canadians more than gun legislation? There's no middle ground. Both sides of the debate are entrenched in their views. Hello and welcome to the Unpublished Cafe. I'm Ed Hand. We're coming to you from a remote location and practicing physical distancing to enhance safety. Almost two years ago, the worst shooting attack on Canadian soil saw 22 people killed in Nova Scotia over a 16-hour period. The guns in question were illegal in this country, having originated from Maine and California. Now, in response to the carnage, the federal government has brought forward Bill C-21, new gun legislation that bans more than 1,500 types of assault rifles, as well as new thresholds for muzzle energy. It would also allow municipalities to legislate a handgun ban in their jurisdiction. Our unpublished vote question asks, do you feel Bill C-21 will reduce the incidence of gun crime in Canada? Yes, no, or unsure. You can log on and vote right now at unpublished.vote and let your MP know how you feel. Coming up on the Unpublished Cafe, we'll take a look at the new legislation and whether there's some common ground for the polarizing views. Coming up later, Rod Gil Tack is the CEO and Executive Director of the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. He will join us. First, I am pleased to be joined by Natalie Provo. She's a spokesperson for Police Se Souvient, a group that speaks out about gun violence in the wake of the 1989 shooting at École Polytechnique. Natalie's a survivor of that attack and is a member of the federal government, was a member of the federal government's Firearms Advisory Committee until 2019. And Natalie, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you. Can I just say something?
Sure.
The ban on these kind of weapons were requested right after the Polytechnique massacre in 1989. That was our first request in the 1990s. It was supposed to be completely done by 1995, but the Liberal government at that time didn't completely complete his law doing it. And it was a promise from the election of 2019 from the Liberal government. And it was also promised after the 30th anniversary of the Polytechnique massacre. Sadly, there was that awful attack in Nova Scotia, but the Liberal decision was not directly linked with what happened in Nova Scotia.
Now, Natalie, after the attack and after the government decided to work on changes to the legislation, you were part of the Firearms Advisory Committee, but
Yep.
you left. Why did you leave? Why did you leave?
Because I didn't want to give my support to the Liberal government without being able to speak to freely speak. Sorry. The committee, I think we could have been able to give a very interesting recommendation to the government, but we were not able to work as freely as we wanted, and I didn't want to be linked with my membership to the committee before the election, so I quit.
All right. Now, you mentioned that you weren't allowed to freely speak. Who was making that dictation?
It's a convention. When you are in this kind of committee, what's in the committee stays in the committee to advise the ministry. So I wanted to have my own capacity of expression. I was involved before with Police Se Souvient, and I still wanted to be able to speak, even if I was, because there was the election. So that's why I left.
All right. Now, 1,500 assault rifles are now banned, and as you had mentioned, they couldn't have been purchased after May 2020. May. Yes, but were not a lot of these already banned for whether the look of them or whether it be the magazine size or its ability to.
It's not a ban.
No.
It's not a ban, it's regulation, but it's not a ban.
All
And
right.
you still can buy a magazine that can be modified. I know it's illegal to modify them, but that can be modified. They had been modified by Marc Lépine. They also had been modified by Alexandre Bissonnette. So they can be modified because they are large capacity magazine limited to 5 bullets. It's not exactly a ban on these kind of magazine.
Right. Now, as part of this with the assault rifles, the government has a volunteer buyback program, but you don't feel that does enough, do you?
No, the pool is there's a lot of people who legally own these kind of weapon in Canada right now, and to speak of a real ban, I think it should be a mandatory buyback.
It should be mandatory.
Mhm.
All right. Now,
If you want to remove them from the streets, I think you should do something to remove them from the legal owners, and you should do something consequent to what they did. When they buy it, so you have to rebuy it correctly.
right. Now, part of the legislation as well is a municipal handgun ban. Uh, do you think that can work, or do you need the provinces involved in that?
We think it should be a Canadian regulation, and we ask it from the beginning.
A handgun ban in all municipalities?
No. It
No.
should be in the Canadian law and regulated at the Canadian level, not at a municipal level
Right.
or at a provincial level. Sorry.
No problem. Now, most illegal guns in Canada are smuggled in primarily from the US. Now, has the federal government done enough to stop that flow?
I'm not a specialist in smuggling, and I think they can do more. But from what I have been through, the weapon used against me, against people in Concordia, in Dawson, and in at the mosque, all those weapons were legally bought with legal owners. So that's why we think we should do something with these kind of weapons. Legally owned.
Right. Yes, I understand that. Now, does the legislation go far enough for public safety, or would you like to see more changes in this legislation?
I already said that we think we should have a mandatory buyback. We think that the red flag proposition are not exactly what's needed by those who are afraid of what will happen with people around them owning guns. So if they feel threatened, I think that they should have a red line where they could call and that something is done quickly. And it's demonstrated that when something happens, the delay for reaction must be very, very short. So, and it's not a 2, 3, 5 weeks delay. If we have to go to court, that's a good way to put into safety those who feel threatened by firearms.
Natalie, I want to thank you for joining us.
I hope it helped you.
Natalie Provo is a spokesperson for Poly Se Souvient, a group that speaks out about gun violence in the wake of the 1989 École Polytechnique shooting. She is a survivor of that attack and was a member of the federal government's Firearms Advisory Committee until 2019. Now, as I mentioned, both sides of the issue not happy with C-21. Rod Gil Tack is the CEO and executive director of the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights, and he joins us now. And let's start with the assault weapon ban. Rod, what do you feel is left out here?
Well, I contrary to feeling that something's left out, there's a lot that shouldn't be happening right now, which is, the seizure of the guns from Canadians, exactly the group of Canadians that typically do absolutely nothing to deserve their property being taken. So it's a problem for a lot of people. I don't think it's a winning strategy for the Liberals, and I think it's everyone's losing all the way around.
Now, okay, is that because the assault weapons were not banned before this legislation came through? Or was coming through?
I'm sorry, maybe I don't know what you mean.
Well, in terms of these weapons that are in the hands of Canadians, they were obviously legal before this legislation was coming through, right? Then May 2020, they were no longer legal, right?
Right. Yep.
Okay. So in that case, I wonder what's the use of having an assault weapon at home, whether it's legal or not?
Okay. Well, first of all, assault weapons were banned in 1977 in Canada. Assault weapons are fully automatic firearms, meant for military application. It's not even that there's no place for those guns in Canada. Movie armors have them, collectors have them, but they're not in general circulation in Canada. What the firearms in question are semi-automatic center fire rifles and shotguns, and they've been safely owned in this country for more than 100 years in the case of an AR-15 since the 60s. So, there's really no justification to take these firearms away from Canadians. It's pure electioneering. It's pure politics, and it's really not going to make anyone safer.
Well, now, has the government done a decent job then? When we come to dealing with the gun issue in Canada, it always comes down to obviously smuggling, and obviously criminals don't register their guns. When it comes to smuggling, and has the federal government done enough to give border security enough to find these from coming into the country?
Well, you know what? That's hard to say because we don't really know what the government is doing. We really don't know what CBS is doing at the border to stop these guns from coming in. We know the government's promised to give them more money. The Liberals certainly are a government that gauges its efforts and its level of success by the amounts of debt it can incur. But at the end of the day, the real problem in Canada is violence. So the real problem is violence, whether it's multiple victim public shootings. The real problem is violence, whether it's gang violence. The real problem with domestic violence is violence. Now, if the government is serious and deals with its crime problem, then its gun problem will disappear as well, and nobody has their property taken, and no one's vilified for being so bold as to get a firearms license. And when it comes to stolen guns, which is really the way that anti-gun people like to connect licensed gun owners, they really don't have much on licensed gun owners, but they always want to get something because it's very easy to take guns from somebody like me and impossible to take them from criminals apparently. But when it comes to stolen guns, which is an issue, that is actually property crime. That's a property crime issue. And where I live in Chilliwack, British Columbia, property crime is a serious problem. The police are powerless to stop it. And that's where your crime guns are coming from if they were once legal in Canada. So deal with your property crime problem, deal with your smuggling problem, and your gun problem goes away. But that's hard work and it takes more than 4 years. And that's why it's not being done.
The buyback program is part of C-21. It's voluntary. It seems to me, and let me know. It seems that part of the program of C-21 is a little light on specifics.
It's absolutely light on specifics. So the legislation just basically referenced the mechanics of a buyback, but no details on how that's actually going to work. It just mentions it. And C-21 also permanently reclassifies those banned firearms as prohibited firearms rather than order in council, which could get overturned. It's a temporary measure. So, what does the buyback look like? We don't know. How much are they going to give people for the guns? We don't know. We don't know anything. And besides, Bill C-21 probably will never make it through the legislative process because if Justin Trudeau calls an election, the bill dies on the order paper, has to be reintroduced later and starts from the beginning again. So this is, as usual, Ed, it's all politics.
Rod Gil Tack is joining us in the Unpublished Cafe, CEO and Executive Director of the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights, as we discuss the federal government's proposed Bill C-21. And included in that, Rod, is a municipal handgun ban. And now we've got 3 levels of government involved in this. And is that, maybe too many?
Yeah, well, it's total insanity. If I would like to, and I'll use Kennedy Stewart. Well, John Tory is another great example, but Kennedy Stewart in Vancouver, for example, Kennedy Stewart has a rampant opioid crisis happening. Thousands of people a year dying in Western Canada from opioid overdose and tainted drug supply. Property crime is through the roof. All kinds of problems, and gangs are running around unabated by Mr. Stewart. And his answer is that if someone belongs to a gun club and lives in the greater Vancouver area or in Vancouver City, which is his jurisdiction, then he will make that person store their gun outside of the city or have to move. And the federal government has created probably the worst solution to any problem ever created by, out of the human mind, which is to make it a federal criminal offense to be in contravention of a municipal bylaw. So we don't know, if you're in contravention of a bylaw, who comes to your door, the RCMP or a bylaw officer from the municipal government? Mm-hmm. It's just a total mess. Misses the mark, of course. And really what the idea, Ed, is Justin Trudeau and people like Kennedy Stewart they're going to get around, smash around in people's lives that would never vote for them anyway. So it's just collateral damage to them. It's all about politics and the appearance of doing something. Does nothing for public safety. And gun owners are losers too in this whole equation, as non-gun owners, because they want a safer Canada and they're not going to get it.
And in terms of a safer Canada, how do you see that happening with gun owners?
Well, you have to deal with your crime problem. Now, it's with municipal handgun bans and with, so-called assault style weapon buybacks and all of the other ridiculousness. It's great. It kicks the can, just like the Liberals kicked the can in 2019 with Bill C-21, just like they kicked the can when they got elected by saying, we're going to do something. 4 years later, they got, 3.5 years later, they got Bill C-71. Those provisions aren't even implemented yet. Here we are in 2021. All of this stuff is just kicking the can and fooling the public into thinking, hey, look at the strong action we've taken. They're going to wreck lives, people like me. I haven't done anything to deserve it, but doesn't matter. I wouldn't vote for Justin Trudeau, and kick the can down the road. And by the time people figure out this did absolutely nothing, they've been in power more, long enough, they would have been turfed anyway, and a new government comes in. So this is very typical of the political class in Canada.
Well, okay, we can go back in the political class when Stephen Blaney used to say that gun ownership is a right in this country, and it's not. When you see it's a privilege, that it's not in the Constitution and it's not in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms.
Well, the Supreme Court has ruled that. That's true. Yep. That's absolutely true. It's not codified, straight up like the Second Amendment, but we do have property rights. Property rights should mean something to Canadians because it's, we're suing the government as we speak over a charter challenge over property rights. And if the government can just walk up with no justification whatsoever and take guns away, and they can walk up with no justification and limit your movement and limit your speech, everything's on the table. And I think most people just want to live their lives. They don't want to have to keep one eye looking at politicians, every day, nor should they have to. But the misbehavior of politicians is getting pretty extreme, and Canada's changing for the worse pretty quickly.
So I'm going to say that from your point, the bottom line for you is this is a crime issue, a property crime issue, and the federal government, whichever level government's got to deal with that crime, deal with that first, and you feel the gun issue will go away.
Well, of course, because if violence is decreased, then your gun problem is decreased, and no one has their things taken. All Canadians are going to benefit from it because we've had successive levels of increasing gun control since 1977, more and more and more. And every time, the gun control people are like, oh, if we can just get this through, then, the violence will be, it'll be gone. And then it doesn't go away. Then the next thing comes in. Oh, if we could just get this through and then we'll be safe, and it doesn't go away. And they keep going and going and going. And, at the end of the day, the politicians all know what's going on. This is like, it's the average Canadian. That's the person who the joke is on. They all know. They know that gun control is a political football. It's a channel changer. And we're all, I think rights are important, and I think people should have some kind of freedom and ability to deal with their own lives. And we're losing more and more of that. And guns is a great issue. It's a great illustration of that.
Rod, I want to thank you for joining us.
I appreciate it. Thanks.
Rod Gil Tack is the CEO and Executive Director of the Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. And that leads to our unpublished vote question. Do you feel Bill C-21 will reduce the incidence of gun crime in Canada? Yes, no, or unsure. You can log on and vote right now at unpublished.vote and have your voice heard. I want to thank our guest, Natalie Provo, spokesperson for Police Se Souvient, a group that speaks out about gun violence in the wake of the 1989 École Polytechnique shooting. She's a survivor of that attack. As well, Rod Gil Tack, CEO and Executive Director, Canadian Coalition for Firearm Rights. And I want to thank you for listening to the Unpublished Cafe. Stay safe. I'm Ed Hand.